What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is a segment that I like to do sometimes where I read through news articles or videos, what have you, anything to do with the news, and I give you my immediate reaction to them, maybe some insight if I have any, or just generally, other people's reactions or what have you, just everything. And today I wanted to give you my reaction to this article that you see here, titled House Republicans Propose Planting a Trillion Trees as They Move Away from Climate Change Denial. House Republicans are searching for solutions to climate change without restricting American produced energy that comes from burning oil, coal, and gas. So essentially, I guess they are trying to find some sort of middle ground where they can help address the climate change issue, which I think for even young Republicans is an important issue, but they also don't want to back away from oil, coal, and gas. And to be honest with you, I mean, that's what we rely on very heavily, so I can sort of see where they're coming from. This is not something that these changes don't happen overnight. But listen, we'll just read through the article and see what they say. So it says here, as Speaker Kevin McCarthy visited a natural gas drilling site in Northeast Ohio to promote House Republicans' plan to sharply increase domestic production of energy from fossil fuels last month, the signs of rising global temperatures could not be ignored. Smoke from Canadian wildfires hung in the air. I've experienced those Canadian wildfires, the smoke, from them, traveling very far. And here in America, we've been getting a lot of, warnings about air quality and such because of these wildfires. I mean, they're pretty serious. But anyway, when the speaker was asked about climate change and forest fires, he was ready with a response: plant a trillion trees. Now, right off the bat, what does that even mean? Plant a trillion trees? I mean, I don't, okay. Kind of sounds just ridiculous. I'm down to plant a trillion trees, but I have a hard time believing that they're serious about this, but we shall see. The idea, simple yet massively ambitious, revealed recent Republican thinking on how to address climate change. The party is no longer denying that global warming exists, yet is searching for a response to sweltering summers, weather disasters, and rising sea levels that doesn't involve abandoning their enthusiastic support for American-produced energy from burning oil, coal, and gas. Now, again, like I said in the beginning, listen, climate change aside, I mean, we as humans rely very heavily on these forms of energy. I don't think even if you were to plant a trillion trees that you can necessarily give up oil, coal, and gas. Even if you were to use electricity and hydroelectric, wind turbines, whatever source you're getting electricity from or power from, it's still going to be difficult to totally abandon our use of oil, coal, and gas. And it seems like they're just trying to make it seem like they're addressing the issue without actually addressing the issue. I don't know. It seems odd to me, but it says here, quote, "We need to manage our forests better so our environment can be stronger," end quote. McCarthy said, adding, "Let's replace Russian natural gas with American natural gas, and let's not only have a cleaner world, let's have a safer world." He has a point here. This is something I've always felt that, if we're going to use these forms of energy, oil and gas and so on, that we have to stop depending on other countries like Russia, like Saudi Arabia, because, even if you're very left-leaning, progressive, and don't want to use oil and gas because of its effects on the environment, while I understand that, I think in the meantime, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you have to admit that we just heavily rely on these forms of energy. And since that is the case, I think the best thing to do in the meantime, while we try to figure out how to get energy from other sources, cleaner sources, in the meantime, we have to try and do our best to avoid getting oil and natural gas from countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia, like I said, because the Middle East and other countries too, because it just leads to other problems, not just climate problems, but wars, conflicts, and so on. People, and it's just a source of tension amongst countries themselves and people. And if we could get away from that and be a bit more energy independent, it would just be a lot better in terms of a geopolitical standpoint. But we'll see. We'll keep moving on here. The Biden administration has also boosted exports of liquefied natural gas to Europe after Russia, one of the continent's largest suppliers of energy, invaded Ukraine. The Democratic president has also said that coal, oil, and gas will be part of America's energy supply for years to come. Scientists overwhelmingly agree that heat-trapping gases released from the combustion of fossil fuels are pushing up global temperatures, upending weather patterns around the globe, and endangering animal species. But the solution long touted by Democrats and environmental advocates, which is government action to force emissions reductions, remains a non-starter with most Republicans. Enter the idea of planting 1 trillion trees. A 2019 study suggested that planting trees to suck up heat trapping carbon dioxide from the atmosphere could be one of the most effective ways to fight climate change. Major conservation groups and former President Donald Trump, who downplayed humanity's role in climate change, embraced the idea. But the tree planting push has drawn intense pushback from environmental scientists who call it a distraction from cutting emissions from fossil fuels. The authors of the original study have also clarified that planting trees does not eliminate the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These are, good points from the other side of the argument. On one side, you have Republicans saying, listen, there's studies being done that prove that planting trees could help. And I think a lot of Democrats on the other side would be fine with that. I don't think Democrats would necessarily be against planting trees, but it seems here that a lot of Democrats feel that it's just it's almost like a fake proposal. It's a deflection, pretty much. It's not a real solution, or even if it is a real solution, they're not serious about it, or at least that's the argument that they seem to be making here. It's something worth looking into. Maybe the article gets into that, but it's not just about planting 1 trillion trees. You have to plant the right trees. Not every, some tree species would be considered invasive in certain areas of the world, including America. So it's about planting the right trees in the right region of America. And then you get to the question of where do you plant them? And how do you prevent them from them being cut down? Because that's the other thing. It's like, okay, you planted 1 trillion trees, but did you protect them? We'll have to see. But the tree planting push has Planting 1 trillion trees would also require a massive amount of space, like I just said, roughly the size of the continental United States. So, I mean, a huge amount of room would be needed. And more trees could even increase the risk of wildfires by serving as fuel in a warming world. This is an interesting point because, as addressed in the beginning of the article, there are a lot of there's an increase in wildfires taking place in Canada and the United States. So actually, I hadn't even thought of this. If you plant more trees, you're also adding fuel to the fire, literally, as it says here. So yeah, it's I hadn't thought of that. There's a lot of value of planting trees, but it's not as panacea. I'm honestly not even sure what that is, but said Mark Ashton, a professor of forest ecology at Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. The GOP's new approach on climate was apparent in 2021. McCarthy and other GOP lawmakers, led by Arkansas Rep. Bruce Westerman, backed a bill to incentivize growing timber forests in the U.S. as part of a worldwide effort to plant 1 trillion trees. Westerman said he expects a similar proposal to advance this year. For Republicans, the bill checks the right boxes. It is friendly to the timber industry and touts a climate solution, sequestering a massive amount of carbon from man-made emissions. That would also partially alleviate the need to wean the country off of fossil fuels. And to be honest, I mean, this is, again, this is a good point as well on the Republican side. It is a solution, and there are studies that show, as they've referenced, and I'm sure I could find some and maybe go over that in a different video, but I mean, there are studies that show that planting trees would help. So is it really something that we should criticize Republicans for? I mean, I think this is something that we should, no matter what party you belong to, should jump on. Planting trees, 1 trillion trees, as crazy as that sounds, it's at least a noble cause, something to look into, at least. But yeah, the article continues. Now that he has a slim House majority, McCarthy has also pushed for expanded energy production. He made the Lower Energy Costs Act the top legislative priority of the new GOP majority, as signified by its bill number H.R. 1. This is something to think about too. The fact that he has a narrow majority means that he's going to have to, give in to some of the more oil and gas energy lobbyists and things of that nature. So it seems like he's trying to strike that balance, and we'll see if it works. The proposal, which passed the House on a mostly party line vote in March, would spur American energy production, especially oil, gas, and coal. Democrats like President Joe Biden rejected the bill as a thinly veiled license to pollute, but Republicans argued it would reduce carbon emissions because U.S. produced fossil fuels are usually cleaner than those produced overseas. What we've been able to demonstrate to the Republican conference is that the strategies that actually work are those that are actually increasing U.S. resources, said Louisiana Rep. Garrett Graves, one of McCarthy's top lieutenants on energy and environmental issues. It lowers energy prices, it lowers emissions, and it makes us more energy independent. The energy legislation also would increase production of critical minerals such as lithium that are used in batteries for electric vehicles, computers, and cell phones, a priority Biden shares. House Republicans and many Democrats have also advanced proposals to speed permitting for energy projects of all types, including those for clean energy such as wind, solar, and geothermal power. I keep reminding Republicans that H.R. 1 made energy affordable, reliable, and clean, said Utah Rep. John Curtis, who has become a leading Republican voice on environmental issues. We're very quick to point out that it made it affordable and reliable. Sometimes we forget to remind people, yes, and clean. That is an important part. I don't know what he means by yes. Does he mean yes as in yes to energy, but clean energy? I guess. But not all Republicans agree that there's a need to address climate change. Rep. Scott Perry, who leads the hard-right House Freedom Caucus, in a hearing Thursday, alleged that the Biden administration's climate change was tackling a problem that doesn't exist. Here's the thing. Whether you agree that climate change is a thing or not, and to be honest, I don't. Climate change itself, I've not always looked too deeply into. But here's the thing. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, nobody wants pollution. Nobody wants to drink water with oil in it or some other pollutant. Nobody wants to breathe air that's contaminated. We've had the wildfires, the smoke from the wildfires come to cities here in America, and you can see how bad the air quality gets. New York had the worst air quality in the world when it had the smoke from the Canadian wildfires passing through. And so it shows that I don't know all the ins and outs of climate change and the arguments, but what I do know is that pollution isn't good. Nobody wants it. So to say that the problem doesn't exist, that's just kind of a ridiculous statement. I mean, climate change itself, like, okay, you can make arguments about, how the issue itself is dealt with and brought up and defined. But what we all really need to be honest here with and just accept is that pollution is not good. And addressing pollution, shouldn't be a problem for anybody. Addressing pollution should be something that you just are willing to do, because why would you want pollution? Like, it doesn't make sense. He continues by saying, Perry went on to declare, without evidence, the article says, that global leaders pushing to reduce carbon dioxide emissions are grifting. Nearly across the board, House Republicans have tried to undo parts of Biden's climate agenda, deriding them as expensive and burdensome. They have targeted government incentives for clean energy projects and denounced investment and strategies that account for environmental impact. Last week, they moved to restrict the Department of Defense from using funds to implement the president's executive orders on climate change. You are seeing a recognition in the Republican Party that climate change is something they are going to have to at least acknowledge, because their constituents are dealing with it on a daily basis, and it's having an increasing economic toll, said Lena Moffitt, an executive director of Evergreen Action, an environmental group that promotes urgent action. But you cannot say you are committed to putting out the house fire while you pour more gasoline on it. Still, Curtis said he has seen an eagerness among Republicans to engage on the issue since he started the Conservative Climate Caucus 2 years ago. The group has grown to 84 Republicans, representing 1/3 of the GOP conference. Curtis said he decided to launch the caucus after he struggled to respond when asked about climate change to constituents in Utah, where he represents a district marked by ski resorts and national parks. Yeah, I mean, Republicans who represent, this is the thing, right now, a lot of Republicans in the past, especially, have always sort of represented the interests of, oil and gas industry and companies and so on, because they could. Those were the constituents that they represented, and their other constituents hadn't yet suffered any consequences of pollution and climate change. The problem is, though, is that as pollution becomes worse and worse, as climate change itself becomes worse and worse, or even if you don't, believe in climate change, the fact is that as pollution becomes more and more prevalent, you're going to have people, whether they be Republicans or Democrats, you're going to have people start to react to that. They're going to, it's a lot easier to say that you don't support this type of legislation that addresses climate change, until it's your house that's being lost to a wildfire that was as bad as it was due to how polluted our environment has become. It's a lot, it's easy to ignore this problem until it's your water that's contaminated and you can't drink it and you have to go to the store and buy bottled water. Or like we saw in Ohio when the train derailed and toxic chemicals released into the air, you started to see people getting sick. I mean, this is happening. I mean, when things are contaminated, polluted, bad things happen. Period. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to see that. That's how life is. And so, it says here, like, as constituents in Utah, like ski resorts and national parks, these are constituents that weren't always facing problems until more recently, because the effects of pollution just hadn't affected them yet. But as more and more people are affected, you're not going to be able to ignore the problem. The article ends saying, quote, "I would get a lot of these young people who would come to town hall meetings, and I would see the disappointment in their eyes when I didn't have a good answer for them," Curtis said. "I felt like in many ways we were losing a generation of Republicans on this issue." He just said what I, basically said, which is, you're not going to be able to ignore this problem. Even if you don't label it as a climate change problem, it's still a pollution problem. And the more people there are, the population of the world, of the U.S. is constantly increasing. So the more people that there are means the more pollution that there is, which means that there's also more people suffering from said pollution, which is just going to, again, just lead to a domino effect where more and more problems start to happen. More and more people get sick, more and more people die, more and more land and air becomes contaminated and frankly just unusable and uninhabitable. And, you don't have to label this as a climate change issue. I think Democrats would be much more successful in getting this point across if they would kind of drop the climate change part and focus more on just pollution, period. Yeah, because whether you're a Democrat or Republican, again, like I said before, nobody wants to, have pollution and deal with pollution and be sick or die from it or whatever. So, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I think it's something to jump on if you're a Democrat and say, hey, listen, hey, if you want to plant trees, let's plant trees. I would maybe hold off on criticizing Republicans from wanting to do this, because you might think that maybe they're trying to deflect, or like this isn't a real solution. But hey, I mean, planting trees, they want to try to make the argument. It seems like that oh, well, you're just adding fuel to the fire. But, Democrats need to be careful here. I mean, are you really going to start saying that planting trees is a bad thing because you just want to, argue because Republicans are the ones doing it and you just don't like Republicans? I get it, you're trying to call Republicans out for maybe being dishonest, but you need to also be careful that you're not missing out on a potential opportunity to work together to find a solution for a real problem simply because you want to play politics. So, if you are a Democrat or a liberal or just somebody who wants to address climate change, just, keep that in mind. Don't just argue against something because it's the Republicans doing it. If anything, this should be an opportunity where you say, hey, listen, if you're saying that there's a problem, you're admitting it, you're saying that it has to be addressed, and you're providing a solution, which means that you admit that this is something we need to address. It's a real issue. You can't deny it anymore. And so if you want to plant 1 trillion trees, then let's go plant 1 trillion trees. You might also still think that it's necessarily, the end all be all, but I mean, that's no reason to just ignore the opportunity that Republicans are giving you. If I were Joe Biden and the Democrats, I would jump on this and say, hey, okay, listen, let's get this done. If Biden can, while he's president, can spin it into something that his administration participated in and accomplished, and he can show that Republicans also wanted it, then he can, use it as a chance to make himself look good while also avoiding a ton of criticism. Because if Republicans want it too, then they're not going to really criticize him. Which is, it's a win-win. So, we'll see. I don't know how realistic this actually is. Like I said, there's a lot of logistical issues they have to take into account. The right trees, the right time in the right area, and then are you even going to protect those trees once they're planted? When you plant trees, they aren't just automatically full grown. They have to grow. You have to give them time and attention and care for them, or just at least leave them alone. And so, it's just we'll see if they do that. But yeah, that's the article. Those are my thoughts. Republicans want to plant 1 trillion trees. We'll see if it happens. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to let me know in the comments if you even think that this is feasible. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? And make sure to subscribe. I try to subscribe to the channel. I try to follow interesting news, give my insights on it, go through it, try to make it more engaging and entertaining to follow the news. Yeah, with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.